Hi, welcome to class. We're the only two right now, but the other ones will show up eventually, right? I hate my life. I hate my life. And Professor Sunrise Productions!
Hello class, Professor Sunrise here. The Banlist finally came out and I have been doing some non-stop testing. Of course I did a lot of theory crafting before because Magnum 2.1, like I said in the last video, was pretty obvious, so I did my testing before then as well to have a very fast and very efficient list to get you guys, and especially me guys, going for YCS Dortmund. Is this list perfect? Probably not. The non-engine definitely needs some working on because the meta is not really 100% established yet, so the perfect non-engine pieces in the deck will probably be still discovered in the future, but at least ratio-wise, this deck is looking very, very clean. It is a 50 card pile, so the math might be a little bit wrong. We will take a look at the math afterwards and see why I think it is the way to go. But for now, don't forget to see a pass on that subscribe button, leave some feedback down in the comment section below, and let's get right into the video. So let's get into that list and just talk about the theory as we go. This is a 50 card pile held together by Small World, so lots of the math will have to take into consideration that Small World is a very good card in my opinion. Small World is definitely a playable card for Dragoning. So let's get into the list. For the Bystials, we have 3 Rebellion, 3 Sarania, definitely mandatory now with only 1 Magnumut. Rest in peace, my brother. I love you. And then still 1 Baldric and 1 Druze Worm. Still think that is the way to go because while Kashira got hit a lot, I still think the theory of having to respect Nip a lot and always wanting to get some sort of disruption with the Magnumut is still definitely there. Baldric is still very solid against Unchained. It's a decent disruption tool, so I think playing 1 Baldric in the main deck is good. And then, of course, the Druze Worm is insane against that deck. You could even argue to play more Druze Worm just as a non-engine piece, so that you would have, like, instead of some of those hand traps or whatever in the as non-engine slots, you play 2 Druze Worm with that, which is also a very good engine piece and can get you going. But for now, I'm not 100% sure if Unchained is going to be that popular that I want to play a Druze Worm for that, because Purely is still going to be a deck, and I still think I want to respect that deck as well a little bit with my non-engine in the main deck. Then we only play the Regained. Of course, Regained has been way better for some time now. As long as Unchained has been in the meta, basically, Granite Beast didn't really make sense. But now with Magnumut at 1, I think you always want to go for Regained no matter what. Because you really want to get the Magnumut in your opponent's turn as well. So the amount of times where you can then activate Granite Beast of the Lubellion and then have Serenia send the Regained and not the Lubellion to get to the Magnumut in the first place, it's gonna be very, very low, so I will never main deck this card, I believe. And then in the side deck, you could argue to play it, but right now it's just way too bad, so I don't think playing the Granite Beast is really that necessary. For starters, we have 3 Black Metal, a 1-for-1. I think this card is mandatory now because this is the next best thing we can get to a Chaos base. So a spell, or like it doesn't matter, but a non-normal summon way to get 2 dragons on the board, one of which is level 4 or lower, is really, really important to play through Disruption. So 1-for-1 is the next best thing for that. Then we have a Samsara Dragon. This is very important in my opinion, for that 1-for-1 actually has some good value, and not only getting us the black metal, but this can also get some Samsara Dragon. If you guys don't know what this does, it's basically it has a sacred effect in Grave where it can add back any level 5 or higher monster, dragon monster, and then it can in theory normal summon it. You probably will never normal summon it, but you really want to have this card in there. It offers so much utility. It is similar to like a Chaos Emperor Dragon, where it's the one card tool you can have in the deck, which you can search or which you can just get to, so that you can recycle your Magnumut somewhat. If it's in the banish pile, you can get it back with the Dissipator. If it's in the graveyard, it's a little harder to get it back. So having like Dragon Reen send Samsara Dragon is really, really solid, or you just search it with the Magnumut. So it does offer that role, which the Chaos Emperor wants to offer, but while being way less bricky. It's an additional target for 1-for-1, because if you only play these, it feels really, really weird to open like 2 of them, and 1-for-1 just seems really bad at that point. So having that additional copy there is really, really solid. Also, when going first, like Samsara Dragon plus like a Sarania is a really good opener to play into, like to just get your engine going. So going first, this is really good. Going second, you probably will always side it out because the utility then is just not that needed. But for now, I really like the Samsara Dragon. Testing with 60 cards, this card is always overperformed. Samsara Dragon is definitely goated, so definitely play it. And then lastly, the Red MD. I don't play the Meteor Dragon. I think I would play it if Gamma was good right now, but because Unchained is the most popular deck, probably, I don't really think I want to play a Gamma just because it's not really good enough. Like, it's a really high impact hand trap usually, so this is the reason we want to play it. But against Unchained, there's no application. The only thing which you could, in theory, Gamma is the Link 2 or like a tour guide, so like 30% of the times you can use the Gamma there. And on the Link 2, that's always chain blocked by the Fire Dog, so I don't think playing Gamma right now is good. And with that, you don't really have a good way to get the Meteor, Dark Burst, whatever dragon alive realistically. So I don't think I would play it right now. If there was no Unchained meta right now and Gamma would be playable like it usually is, you could argue to play it, but for now I will definitely be saving that brick. Then of course the rest of the starters, 3 Seyfried, only 1 Chaos base, Sag, and then the Chaos Dragons, pretty standard there. Then for extenders, we play 3 Noctivision. This is really helpful of getting consistently into the engine as well. This card is insane. It was always really good. It was just not fittable into Dragon Link decks because you just had so many good cards with Chaos Base and Magnum. Now these 4 slots are open, so Noctivision is definitely very good. Also very important for small word bridges, so it comes up there a lot of times. You could maybe cut this to 2, but I think for now this is really solid. Then rocket stuff. 3 quick launch, 2 tracer, Caliber, recharger, apps, and the field spells wherever the second one is. There it is. Yeah, pretty standard. I think I would like to play 3 tracer, but for now I just don't see it. Just because the Samsara Dragon offers a more important role in my opinion of having the utility to recycle a Magnum, the utility and consistency of going first, getting into a Lubellion. So just having that 4th copy of a Seyfried is really helpful by going up to 50 to keep the consistency and keep the ratios going. So I think that's just a little better. And going second, I just always sat it out anyways, right? So why even bother? So I think this is fine. You could argue to play 3 Tracer. You could also argue to cut the Caliber, but Caliber has been coming up a lot for me. So I think it's still better than the second Recharger in my opinion. Then for non-engine, a good reason why 50 card Dragon Link is better, or like 60 card in general, is that you actually, the ratio to engine to non-engine is way better than in the 40 card. We do play a mid-range approach, so having a very good engine to non-engine ratio is very welcome. And 40 cards or 40-ish card, there rarely is a point where you can get like above 9 or 10 slots, and then you can't really breach that 70, like 80% mark of seeing non-engine. With this, it's actually kind of doable. So for non-engine, play 3 talents. This is insane. Right now, 3 Nib, 3 Ash, and then the small worlds, which are also starters, of course, extenders and non-engine, because we can search a Santa Claus to out Noir, or like the XZs of the Unchained board, and 1 Veiler, which is really important for small word bridges a lot of times. So I think this is very good right now. So overall, these non-engine tries to beat basically Unchained. It's really bad against Purely, which is why I'm a little bit scared of it, and maybe I want to like cut this for some books in the main deck, because Book of Eclipse is still main deck worthy in my opinion. It still should be decent, or like maybe for some imperms, but then those are also really bad. So if I cut the Ashes for imperms and the Purely has Street up, I just don't have anything either. So this right now is mainly just built to beat Unchained, but if Purely becomes too popular, like 30% of the representation, or like 20 in the top card is Purely, I think you have to do something differently there. Respect Purely a little bit more in the main deck, but for now, with Unchained being the hot next best thing, I think this is a decent approach to the non-engine. So that's a 50 card main deck. The extra deck is basically 1-for-1 the same than it has been pre-Banlist, because this mainly tries to beat Nibiru. So I think that's still the same thing, because Unchained is still the best deck. So we have Striker, Romulus, 2 Seal, and the Pisty line into Borderland. Of course, that's pretty standard. Then we have Dark, which is standard. That's a dog, barking, gotta love him. And then we have Masquerena, Unicorn Access Code. The reason why I started to play Masquerena is that Masquerena is really good at playing around Nibiru. So what we always want to go now for is a seal in the EMZ very early on, like as early as possible. And then we want to, at least pre-Banlist, we wanted to get into a Dissipator to get it into the graveyard for the Regain. We can't even skip this gap now because Regain is really good at just getting Magnamut back. So we still want the seal protection, and we want something meaningful to get our bodies into. So Masquerena is definitely the best thing to use like the value we can garner after we already went through a seal. So any 2 bodies we do afterwards can go into a Masquerena, which is really, really helpful. And we can still go for this Pater, we just will leave it on the board and use 1 extender extra to get into Masquerena. So what you usually try to end for is this board, and if this gets nipped, we are not Darklock yet, then we have Regained here, and Seal getting us 2 bodies. We can usually then get the Black Metal or the Safred and get 2 extra additional bodies of Seal, and then we can just make a second Seal. If we went for the Black Metal line, we can even make Seal Savage afterwards very, very easily, or we can just save the Rocket Engine in hand and just bait the nip like that, because this is a very strong end board. If we have like 1 or 2 non-engine pieces with that, we will 100% survive the turn, and if we kept the whole Rocket Engine in our hands, so Boot Sector, Ravine, stuff like that, we have so much follow-up that we can always win just after that. This just really helps play through Nibiru, so I really like it, and Masquerena, thanks to Unicorn, is also really good against Unchained. Unicorn comes up a lot against the deck anyways to out their stuff if you don't have access to Jerusalem or you already went through Jerusalem, and then access code just makes sense with that as well. We do have to make some concessions at the synchro part, so we only have Savage, Baron, Dispater, Chaos Angel, no Attuned, and no Scarlight, but Attuned with Magnamut at 1, it's even finer now, and I haven't really missed it. I've been playing for weeks with it, like every time I'm on stream, there was no Attuned, because every time you have 2 links, 2 Bystials on the board, plus the opponent doesn't have any disruption, you usually win because you just go into Ravine anyways, and then make like a Borderland, and that should be enough to seal the deal in any game state like that, so I don't think you need it, and those are just all we need. You could cut the Chaos Angel for a Scarlight, but I don't think Scarlet is a very good win condition in time, and I don't like going for it. I always just fumble the back, and most of the time you can just scoop game 2 and go into a longer game 3 anyways. So for the side deck, of course, similar to the non-engine in the main deck, this can have some tweaking and it's all very experimental, but this tries to beat Unchained. Flunder, very, very importantly, big combo piles, and Purity. These are the decks which I'm trying to beat the most. So we have 3 Thrust, very good card, of course, for Herald, and the Feather Duster I still think super strong because so many non-engines like are in the form of books, probably still imperm, so I still think having a Feather Duster into so many matchups is really, really good. Then we have 1D Barrier. This is the concession I made against Chimera Branded. I figured that I didn't really have anything which I wanted to side in going first. The deck plays a lot of non-engine in the form of hand traps, so I think like going for like these can be really solid against them. Otherwise, I wouldn't have anything, and that's just 1 additional slot against that deck, especially because D-Barrier is also really good against Purely, so if you get nipped or drolled by them, or just small hand traps, because they happen to be the way to go right now, D-Barrier is just an auto-win against that deck. And then I have 1 Virus. This is a concession against Flunder. I figured I didn't have anything against Flunder. I was thinking about playing like Gozen in the main deck, but then I didn't have in the side deck. But then I didn't have anything against combo piles going second, so I wanted to still have something there, and I had something there in the form of 3 Droll and Lockbird. And then I noticed I didn't have anything if I get going first shifted by Flunder, and I really respect that. I think Flunder is going to pick up lots of popularity, and Flunder's matchup against us is even better than Kashira had because it's way too hard. There's just not one single non-engine which deals with their board. It's really, really hard to get going against that deck. So I think going for the drone lockbird is really good. But going first, if we get shifted, we just don't have anything. So thrust into Eradicator usually is good enough because if they're only playing with 1 bird, we can usually just use Seal to bounce the bird, and then they cannot really get into Empen. So we should be fine in that regard. And Draw, like I said, is the concession against big combo piles, which I think will take up some popularity, especially in the beginning of the format, because Unchained is just, at least for now, playing mostly breakers. So like Emanadium or Rika can just breeze through that matchup quite easily. And Draw is also really good against Flunder. It's solid against a plethora of decks, so I think that's a good call on the side. Then we have 2 Drew's Worm. These are good against Mirror, against mostly Unchained. So I think these are very good additions, and Jerusalem is just insane. Playing 2 in the side deck has always been very, very strong just because it's so good going second. And then lastly, 3 Book of Eclipse to counter Purely. Do have to respect that. It's also really good going first against a plethora of decks, so it makes hiding patterns a little easier because we have something to put in going first and going second, similar to the Drolls. So that's really, really helpful. A few cards which I wanted to play in the side deck are a Phantasme, and a Kurikara to just have an additional small world target for Purely, but because we already play like 7 very good additions into the purely deck. I don't think that was needed. And against Unchained, because most of our main deck is built to beat it, and we have 2 Drew's Worm and 3 Thrust, and we can even put in the Herald if we wanted to. I don't think we need that additional slot there, so I'd rather have that against Flunder and against Chimera, which were the 2 slots which were changed up, so that we have at least something against those decks. But for example, if they don't play any hand traps whatsoever, the small thrust into those traps doesn't really matter anyway, so might as well not go for it, and then we maybe play something completely different. But time will tell how we will use our side deck against the meta, because once the meta is established, we can make it a better call. So now that we got to the whole main deck, let's take a look at the math behind 50 versus, like, I think realistically 42 cards Dragon Link, which is something you can realistically build right now, and see how the chances of seeing starters, extenders, non-engines, stuff like that will change, and why I think 50 card might just be a little better. So before we go into the actual math, let's quickly take a look at the 42 card list which I had in mind. So it would probably look something like this, with 9 non-engine slots, the max out black metal, still the 1-for-1, but no Samsara Dragon utility, no small worlds, less non-engine overall, and the rest is pretty standard. Sadly, only 1 Octavision, because the more you go up, the more you lose the consistency. So there's that. And before we get into the math now, let's quickly take a look at what extenders I think the deck actually has to offer. So for extenders in the math, I did count the Lubellion, the Magnamut, the Serenius, because these all are very, very good, because Serenia gets you into Lubellion, Magnamut is just insane, stuff like that. Then we have Chaos Space and Wyver Burster. I don't count Collapse because it's a little too inconsistent, but Wyver Burster basically can extend off any starter, so I would count that as one. Quick Launch, while not putting a lot of bodies onto the board, is still a very good extender, because it basically equals the Rocket Engine all by itself. So if you have a very good hand, Rocket becomes insane. So having access to the Quick Launch while having like Seyfried plus Serenia or something like that is really, really good. And then we have 1-for-1 as an extender as well, just because it helps you push through boards, and then 1 Noctivision because it's basically a +1 for free. That is very, very good. So these are all of the extenders which I plan on bringing into the math. Now let's finally do the math and take a look at that. So for going first with 42 with this 50, we have the percentage here on the left for the 42 and the 50 on the right. So if we take a look at the percentage of seeing a starter or an extender, luckily they're both the same at 88.4 when going for 42, or 92%, which is a 4% increase almost, which is very, very welcome. I think it was 92.1 or like 92. I think it was just 92. So having an almost 4% chance of seeing a way to play, and then more importantly, even extending that way to play, is very, very huge. Then for non-engine percentage, we have a 72%. And then we have, compared to that at the 50 card, we have 84.7% chance. So that's like 12, almost 13% chance of seeing a non-engine, which is huge. Especially if you take into consideration that we even have a higher chance of seeing a starter as well. Now 42 just becomes a little better if we just take a look at 3-offs. So for 3-offs, we have a 32% chance versus a 27.6% chance. So that's like almost 5%, almost a little even more percent chance of seeing like an unsearchable 3-off. So your Lubellians, which are not that bad because you can get to them otherwise. But think about your Nips, your Thrusts, your Ashes, stuff like that. This is where 42 just becomes a little better compared to 50, just because the 5% chance of seeing like an auto-win Floodgate can be huge. But this also comes with a downside, of course, because for unsearchable one-offs, think of Boot Sector, or like they are searchable, but you get the point. You almost have a 2% higher chance of seeing them, which is very annoying, because like a 2% higher chance of seeing a rig can be kind of annoying, especially in a longer tournament with like going for like 12 rounds of Swiss at a YCS or something like that. These do count up, especially if you combine them with the lower chance of actually seeing to play. So those can be annoying. Let's take a look at going second maths. So for here, we do have a very nice 92.4% chance of seeing plays when going second with a 42 version. Compared to the 50 version, we have a 95.4, so that's very, very welcome. That's like super, super good at getting into plays. We have a 78.9% chance of seeing non-engine. Problem is Nibiru and Ash are not really that good at going second, so like the increased likelihood of seeing a non-engine is not completely translated into just always having that card be alive. So there's that, compared to the 7.7% chance of seeing non-engine in the 50 card, and we have to take into consideration that we have cards like Small World to make use out of non-engine even if we draw it as a 6th card, just because that's just the freest Small World bridge ever. For 3-offs we have a 37% chance compared to the 32, so still like the 5% chance is there and you won't get that out of the deck. And then for 1-offs we have a 14.3% against a 12% chance, so still the 2% chance is there. Overall, I still think the math speaks for a 50 card version. It's basically always a better way to play for 50 cards apart for unsearchable 3-offs, and overall I still think getting the engine alive is way better than seeing the most impactful non-engine, especially because right now there is just not this one non-engine which just basically auto wins every matchup. Talents basically gets there being like the best non-engine in the game right now, but with Thrust going second we still have 6 ways of getting there, so the math of this just becomes less relevant then. So in my opinion, 50 card just feels way better if, and that's like a small or big if depending on the amount of testing we get done, if Small World is there to perform. Small World can be a little iffy of a card because it is just inherently a -1, but if the meta is right for it, so there's very little draw, for example, and you use it right, for example, you use your Bystials maybe to bait out like the Unchained Trap which arrives, and then the Bystial just stays in your hand, then you have a very easy Small World pitch to very easily get out the Small World and basically lose no card advantage and get huge tempo swings, which Small World is really good at. It also helps you push through boards when getting hand trapped, so your starter gets hand trapped. Small World is one of the few cards which can still get you into that Wyver Burst or into that Collapse Serpent to still get popping off. While it's not as good as Chaos Space when going second, so it doesn't really help against the book all too much, I still think Small World is a very good addition to the deck because it helps you get into non-engine, into engine, into starters, into extenders. It can get to everything. It can get to Lubellion, it can get to Black Metal, it can get to Sacred if you build your deck accordingly. So I think Small World is going to put on a lot of work. Even if it goes -1, it's not really that big of a deal. Our hand traps right now with Nibiru and Ash are pretty targeted. So like if we are up against Chimera and we have a Nib, that's a very easy Small World bridge to use on because yeah, it's a -1, but realistically the -1 doesn't matter because we wouldn't have gotten any value of the card anyway. So if you take all of those into consideration and play to Small World's strength and build our deck around it, I still think Small World is a very strong addition and can very easily be counted towards all of those of starters, extenders, and non-engine, while it being a -1, I still think the utility it all offers to those makes it very easy to count into them, and then we can take this math for granted and we don't have to take it with a grain of salt, and we just see, okay, we have a 4% increased chance of seeing a starter and extender. In a 12 tournament round like of Swiss, these will just count up. We have a 12% higher chance of seeing non-engine. So going first, we are playing against a purely they go first, sorry, and then they just have the Noir there. We have a way higher chance of actually beating that, or against Unchained. Stuff like that all really will just add up, and the only downside of the 3-offs being a little less accessible is very negligible, is that the word? Anyways, right now. And overall, I'm a huge fan of the 50 card version. Definitely let me know what you think about that in the comment section down below. For now, class is dismissed. You guys are free to leave. Professor Sunrise out. Peace.